My name is Alexia Walls, and for 20 years of my service to this country, I have been forced to live two lives. At a formal hall in Fort Meade, my father, Captain Robert Walls, sat in the front row, his chest puffed with pride. He thought he was there to be honored. He didn't know he was there to witness a judgment. When the four-star general began reading the commendation for Operation Black Fog and the 48 lives saved, my father nodded, satisfied, until the general said, "Thanks to her extraordinary and decisive command." I saw my father's shoulders go rigid. Next to him, Lieutenant Colonel Briggs, a retired SEAL and my father's old friend, already knew. Before my father's brain could process it, Briggs's military instinct took over. He shot to his feet, back straight, and snapped a sharp salute toward a dark corner, where I was standing. My family thought I was just a secretary. They had no idea that in my world, silence is a command. Let me know where you're watching from, and subscribe if you've ever been underestimated by your own family just because you didn't brag about your achievements. That moment at Fort Meade. That wasn't the beginning. It was the end of something. The beginning, the real inciting incident, happened a few weeks earlier on a humid Saturday under a cloudless Maryland sky, with the smell of charcoal and lighter fluid hanging in the air. After a 96-hour marathon shift at Meade, the kind that leaves your eyes feeling like sandpaper and your brain buzzing from too much classified data, I made the 40-minute drive to my parents' house in Annapolis. It was my father's kingdom, a tidy suburban backyard with a perfectly manicured lawn and a weathered deck that proudly flew the Navy flag. This was his world. The air was thick with the smell of sizzling burgers and the sharp scent of cut grass. Country music whined from a portable speaker, and a crowd of my father's friends, all retired Navy, all wearing polo shirts tucked into khaki shorts, stood around the grill, nursing their Coors Lights and talking about the old days. Their laughter was loud, booming, a contest of who could be the most nostalgic. I walked through the side gate, trying to balance the large glass bowl in my arms. I was carrying the potato salad my mother, Elaine, had insisted I bring. Not asked, insisted. At 48 years old, a colonel in the U.S. Army, I was still the daughter assigned to bring a side dish. I tried to blend in. I put on the smile I'd perfected over 2 decades, a brittle practice thing that didn't reach my eyes. I was just Alexia here, not Colonel Walls. My father, Robert, spatula in one hand and a beer in the other, spotted me. He was a big man, and his laughter was even bigger. It erupted from him, silencing the country music. "Well, look who it is," he bellowed, loud enough for the entire backyard to hear. "Our little secretary from D.C. is here." A wave of sycophantic laughter rippled through the Navy vets. I felt my face flush, the heat rising under my skin, hotter than the grill. "Keeping the coffee hot for the big shots at the Pentagon, Alexia?" he continued, jabbing the spatula toward me. "Don't go spilling any paper now." More laughter, louder this time. I just stood there, holding the potato salad, that practiced smile frozen on my face. Every fiber of my being wanted to scream. To tell him that my desk was 3 floors underground in a skiff. That the papers I handled could start or stop a war. That the coffee I drank tasted like ash after 72 hours straight of coordinating an op. But I couldn't. The oath I took, the security clearance that defined my real life, had padlocked my mouth. My silence, which was a weapon in my world, was a cage in his. And then, just as the laughter started to die down, my mother, Elaine, glided over. She placed a hand on my arm, her touch light, her rings cool against my skin. "Oh, Robert, stop it. He's just kidding, honey," she said, her voice a soft coo. But I looked at her eyes. They were bright, not with sympathy, but with agreement. She was his audience, his accomplice. She leaned in as if to share a secret, though her voice carried. "But he's got a point, you know. A woman your age. You should be finding a nice man to take care of you, instead of playing this little soldier game." She gestured vaguely at my simple slacks and blouse. "Look at you. You're always so tense." That was the blow. My father's words were like a club, loud, clumsy, and blunt. But my mother's? Her words were a stiletto. A thin blade slid perfectly between the ribs, straight into the heart. She hadn't just insulted my career, she had dismissed my entire life, my entire identity, as a little game. As something I should trade in for a man. The tenseness she saw wasn't my job. It was the strain of visiting them. I had no words. I just stared at her, the potato salad suddenly weighing 1,000 pounds. That's when a new silence cut through the murmur. A man stepped forward. Lieutenant Colonel Briggs, a retired SEAL, and ironically, my father's oldest friend. He was the opposite of my father, lean, quiet, with eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He was the only one in the entire yard who wasn't laughing. He walked right past my father and stopped in front of me. His sharp SEAL eyes looked straight at me, not with pity, but with assessment. His gaze dropped for a fraction of a second to my left wrist, where my watch band had slipped, revealing the small inked outline of the Unit 79 insignia. It was barely visible, meant to be overlooked. Briggs didn't overlook it. He said nothing about it, he just looked me in the eye. His voice was low, respectful. "Where do you serve, ma'am?" He called me ma'am. The air crackled. Before I could even form a reply, my father, oblivious, lunged back into the conversation, swatting Briggs on the shoulder. "Her? Serve?" he roared, laughing again. "She serves the Xerox machine, Briggs. She's allergic to real combat." The pack laughed with him, a chorus of agreement. But Briggs didn't laugh. He held my gaze for one more second. Then he turned, slowly, and looked at my father. He didn't say a word, but I saw it. A flicker of something, recognition, understanding, and maybe disgust, passed through his eyes. He had seen my tattoo. He had heard my father's dismissal. And in that tiny, silent moment, he understood the disconnect. My father, sensing the mood shift he'd created, but not understanding it, just faltered, his laugh dying in his throat. The damage was done. Briggs's simple, respectful question had exposed the entire charade. He saw me, and in doing so, he made the humiliation unbearable. It was a pain I knew well. It was old and deep and scarred over. But that day, with that single silent look of recognition from a stranger, the scar tissue ripped wide open. That familiar, suffocating pain, it was suddenly, completely, unbearable. That pain at the barbecue. It was familiar. As I drove away from my parents' house in Annapolis, the potato salad bowl sitting empty and mocking me from the passenger seat, I could feel that old, cold tightness in my chest. This wasn't a new wound. It was a scar, one that had been ripped open so many times it would never fully heal. That pain has a history. It's a map drawn across my entire life, with every major milestone marked not with a pin of celebration, but with a blot of quiet disappointment. If I trace it back, the first major landmark on that map was the day I graduated from West Point. You have to understand, for a military family, a West Point graduation is a legacy event. I was 22 years old. I had survived 4 years of one of the most grueling academic and physical institutions on Earth. I was standing on the parade ground at the Plain, a sea of 900 cadets in our dress gray uniforms about to become second lieutenants in the U.S. Army. My parents, Elaine and Robert, were there. They sat in the stands, my father conspicuous in his crisp Navy-branded polo shirt, a visitor in enemy territory. After the ceremony, after I'd tossed my hat in the air with the rest of my class, I found them. I was beaming, my face sore from smiling. I held my diploma in my hand. I was, for that one moment, purely and completely proud of myself. My mother hugged me and fussed over my uniform. And my father, a retired Navy captain, just nodded slowly. He looked around at the historic granite buildings. "Well," he said, his voice loud, "the Army's still too rigid for my taste, and the food they served at the reception was terrible." I waited. I just waited. I stood there, a 22-year-old soldier, waiting for the 3 words that every child, no matter their age, wants to hear. "I'm proud of you, Alexia." The words never came. Instead, he looked at my diploma, then back at me. "I just hope you know what you're doing," he said, his tone heavy. This isn't a game. As if I thought it was. As if the last 4 years had been a joke. The pride I felt curdled, turning into that familiar cold knot in my stomach. I had climbed a mountain, and he was complaining about the cafeteria food at the base. But that was just one landmark. The map gets darker. Fast forward a few years. I was a major, just back from a rotation. My brother, Kevin, 2 years younger than me, was, well, Kevin. He was the golden child. The one who had my mother's charm and my father's approval, despite having accomplished absolutely nothing. He'd dropped out of college, twice, and was finding himself, which apparently involved sleeping on my parents' sofa and racking up debt. It was Christmas. The living room was warm, smelling of pine and my mother's baking. We were all there, opening presents. I opened mine from my parents. It was a gift certificate for a spa. To help you de-stress, honey, my mother said, smiling brightly. Your desk job at the Pentagon must be so tiring. My desk job. I was a major in Army intelligence. I was coordinating signals intelligence in active theaters. But in their eyes, I was a paper pusher who just needed a good massage. I smiled that practiced, brittle smile and said, Thank you, it's lovely. Then came Kevin's gift. There's one more for you, son, my dad said, a rare twinkle in his eye. It's in the driveway. Kevin, confused, walked to the front door and we all followed. And there, in the driveway, with a giant red bow on the hood, was a brand new, cherry red Ford F-150 pickup truck. Kevin, the 30-year-old college dropout, was getting a $40,000 truck. I, the 32-year-old Army major, got a $100 spa voucher. A man needs a fresh start, my father boomed, slapping Kevin on the back. This'll help you get on your feet. The air in the house, which had been warm and festive, suddenly felt thick. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't about the money. It was about the value. It was the crushing, suffocating proof of what they truly thought of us. He was an investment. I was an afterthought. But the final, deepest cut on that map happened at Thanksgiving. My father had invited a younger colleague from his old Navy circles. This man spent the entire dinner bragging about his own son, a junior analyst at some DC think tank. He just wrote a brilliant paper, the man boasted, a full analysis on cybersecurity threats from Eastern Europe. My father was instantly electrified. He leaned forward, his eyes bright. He slapped the man on the back. That's a soldier's mind right there, he roared approvingly. Sharp, strategic. That's the kind of thinking that wins wars. I just sat there, my fork frozen in my hand. I quietly pushed my mashed potatoes around my plate. Just 1 week earlier, my own analysis on that exact subject, not a think tank paper, but a classified strategic assessment, had been published in an internal, high-level military journal. It was a big deal in my world. I had been so proud. I'd actually broken my own rule and sent a declassified summary of it to my father's personal email. I'd spent an hour making sure it was perfect, hoping, just hoping, it would finally be the thing that made him see me. He never mentioned it, while he was busy praising a stranger's son for a paper he'd never read. My actual real-world analysis was sitting in his inbox. Later that night, I checked my sent folder, just to see. The email was still there, unopened. That was the night I finally understood. It was the night I stopped trying. My father didn't want to see me. My success, my intelligence, my achievements in his world, they didn't make him proud. They made him feel threatened. He was a retired captain, and his daughter was rapidly outpacing his own legacy. He needed me to be small so he could feel big. And my mother, in her desire for a peaceful, traditional life, was his loyal audience, reinforcing his narrative. I was the tense, stressed-out secretary who just needed a spa day and a good husband. So I let them have it. I built the Alexia walls they wanted to see. I stopped sharing. I stopped talking about my work. I let them believe I pushed papers. My job's high-level security, the oaths I'd sworn, became the perfect camouflage. My necessary silence at work became my self-defensive silence at home. If you've ever had to make yourself smaller or hide your light just to keep the peace in your own family, please support this story with a like. And just comment with a simple, I see you, if you know exactly what that kind of invisibility feels like. That secretary shell. It became my armor. It kept me safe. But it also left me with a cold, terrifying question that echoed in the silence of my apartment night after night. If the people who were supposed to love me, the people who made me, refused to see the real me, then who was I? That question? Who was I? It used to echo in my head during the long, quiet drives home. But the echo always stopped at the gates of Fort Meade. The moment my car passed the final checkpoint, the question wasn't a question at all. It was an answer. My family saw Alexia, the tense, quiet daughter, the secretary. But Alexia didn't have clearance. Alexia was a role I played at barbecues. The woman who walked through the 5 layers of security at the National Security Agency headquarters was Colonel Walls. My world was a place my family couldn't even imagine. It began with the first heavy steel door, where I swiped my badge. It continued through a man-trap, a revolving glass chamber that weighed me and scanned my face. Another badge swipe, another secure door, a keypad, a final biometric palm scan. With each layer, a piece of the outside world fell away. The humidity of Maryland, the sound of traffic, the memory of my mother's disappointed sigh. By the time I walked into my office, the CIF, I was no longer Alexia. I was Colonel Walls. The CIF, Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility, was my real home. It was a vast, windowless room, 3 floors underground, perpetually chilled to 68 degrees to protect the acres of servers. The only light was the cold, blue-white glow from dozens of tactical screens. The only sound was the constant low hum of the ventilation system and the quiet, frantic tapping of keys. This was Unit 79. My unit. Even my voice changed in the SCIF. The soft, accommodating tone I used with my family was gone. Here, my voice was low, calm, and precise. It was a tool. When I spoke, people moved. This was the world my father thought I was allergic to. The world my mother thought was a little game. One night, a few weeks after the barbecue, that little game went live. I walked into the command center for my night shift, and the air was already electric with tension. It was Neuro 130. Report, I said, not to anyone in particular. My lead analyst, a young Air Force captain, didn't even look up. Ma'am, it's Operation Black Fog. It's gone sideways. A-team is pinned down. Ambush. Operation Black Fog was our baby. My unit had spent 6 months using signals intelligence to locate a high-value target and a cell of 48 Allied operatives who had been taken hostage. The mission was simple. Get our people out. Now, it was a disaster. I looked at the main screen. Red icons were flashing, indicating hostile contact. I could hear the tinny, frantic voices of the on-site command overlapping on the comms. The center was in chaos. My father thought I served the Xerox machine. Right now, I was commanding the nerve center of a real-time extraction, and 48 lives were on the line. I took a breath and pushed the chaos out. My mind went cold and clear. Mute the external comms, I ordered. The room fell silent, save for the hum. Give me the drone feed, now. And pull up the last 20 minutes of hostile chatter. I want to know where they came from. For an hour I watched, I read, I listened. The team was trapped in a compound, with enemy fighters pouring in from the south. The extraction window was closing. They're being herded, I said, pointing to the screen. Look, the enemy is pushing them north, but they're leaving the west side utility tunnel completely open. It's a trap. My analyst nodded. They're probably waiting for them to break for the tunnel, then detonate IEDs. Exactly, I said. I looked at the drone's thermal imaging. I saw the heat signatures of the 48 soldiers huddled. I saw the enemy closing in. And I saw something else. A flicker. An old, abandoned aqueduct, just 50 meters from the eastern wall. The data stream I'd analyzed months ago flashed in my head. That's the flaw, I whispered. I grabbed my headset. This is Colonel Walls, I said. My voice was different now. Not just calm, it was a command. I'm overriding the on-site protocol. I want Alpha Team to hold their position. And I want the support drone rerouted, full weapons load. Target, the aqueduct. The room froze. Ma'am, my analyst said, his voice tight. The aqueduct is empty. No, it's not, I said, pointing to the data. The hostiles are using it as a covered staging ground. They're hiding their main force there to block the exfil route. They think we don't see them. We're not going to run into their trap. We're going to blow up their front door. My father thought I was allergic to combat. Override Protocol Alpha, I commanded. Reroute the support drone. Target the eastern aqueduct. Fire on my mark. Now. For 3 minutes, the only sound was the ping of the drone repositioning. Target locked, ma'am, the drone operator said. Fire, I said. The screen flashed white. 3 hours later, the sun was coming up over Maryland. The room was thick with the smell of stale coffee and adrenaline. The final report came in from the exfil choppers. All packages secure, Colonel. 48 souls accounted for. Every one of them. We're coming home. The room exhaled. There was no applause, no cheering. In this world, you didn't celebrate, you just worked. People nodded, put their headsets down, and started writing the after-action reports. My boss, General Hale, walked over. He was a quiet, imposing man. He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. Good work, Colonel, he said, his voice a low gravel. You saved them. He looked around the quiet humming room. You've earned this silence. That was my reward. A quiet, good work. A silent, professional respect. And 48 lives. At 02 hours, I was back in my car, driving to my empty DC apartment. The sterile orange glow of the city streetlights washed over me. The silence in the car was different. It wasn't earned. It was just empty. I walked into my cold, dark apartment. I dropped my keys in the bowl. I was a hero, and I was completely, utterly alone. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. For 1 stupid second, my heart leaped. Maybe my mom was checking in? I looked at the screen. It was a text from her from earlier that night. I'd missed it. Alexia, your father was very hurt that you left the barbecue so early on Saturday. You really embarrassed him in front of his friends. You need to be more considerate. I stared at the glowing screen. The words blurred. I had just saved 48 lives. I had commanded a secret operation, outthought an enemy, and brought 48 people home. And in my family's world, the most important thing was that I had embarrassed my father by not wanting to be publicly humiliated. The whiplash, the sheer dizzying disconnect between my two worlds, almost buckled my knees. I closed my eyes. There was no one to tell. There was no one to celebrate with. There was no one to even hold my hand. I walked to the freezer. I pulled out a Stouffer's lasagna. The cardboard box was cold in my hands. I peeled back the plastic, stuck it in the microwave, and pressed the frozen dinner button. I stood in the dark kitchen, just me and the blue light of the microwave timer, and listened to the only sound in the room. The quiet, lonely hum of my dinner being heated. I ate it, standing up, right out of the plastic tray, alone. In the silence. After that night, after that text, something in me went cold. The 96-hour shifts, the microwave dinners, the absolute, crushing silence of my apartment. It all just became my new normal. The Alexia shell that I had built for my family felt less like armor and more like a coffin. I just went dark. I worked, I slept, I ate my Stouffer's lasagna, and I spoke to no one. Then, about 3 weeks after the barbecue, I got a mandatory notification in my government email. The annual Army-Navy Charity Gala. In the DC military world, this was a command performance. It was a night of forced mingling, rubbery chicken, and bad speeches, all for a good cause. As a Pentagon staffer attached to a general's office, my name was on the attendance list. I couldn't get out of it. I hated these things. I hated the small talk. I hated the perfume. But most of all, I hated the wardrobe. My entire closet was divided into two sections: combat-ready tactical gear and the bland, forgettable pantsuits of my Alexia cover. For this, I had to wear a dress. I pulled out the one I always wore, a simple, floor-length black sheath. It was the color of invisibility. The gala was held in a massive, historic ballroom in D.C. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the sound of clinking glasses. It was a sea of shimmering evening gowns and immaculate, metal-adorned dress uniforms. Men and women I knew from briefings were there, transformed into glittering social versions of themselves. And I was just there, standing alone, near a towering floral arrangement, nursing a club soda with a lime. I felt like a ghost. I was completely, utterly alone in a room full of hundreds of people. I was just counting the seconds until I could appropriately slip out the side door, go home, and put my real uniform, sweatpants, and an old army t-shirt back on. "Good evening, Colonel." The voice was quiet, low, and directly beside me. It cut through the noise of the gala like a honed blade. I stiffened. I turned. It was Lieutenant Colonel Briggs. My heart didn't just jump, it slammed against my ribs. He wasn't in the relaxed khaki shorts and polo shirt from the barbecue. He was in his own dress uniform, the dark blue of the Navy, adorned with the ribbons of a long and storied career. He was a retired SEAL, a legend, and he was standing in front of me, holding 2 glasses of whiskey. "Lieutenant Colonel," I managed to nod, my voice tight. My mind was racing. Was he here to mock me? Was this a continuation of Robert's joke? He didn't smile. Those sharp, assessing SEAL eyes looked right at me, not at my dress, not at my face, but right into my eyes. I did a little research after that event. "At Roberts," he said, his voice just for me. I started looking up Unit 79. My blood went cold. I stopped breathing. He continued. Of course, I couldn't find a single mention of it, anywhere. He took a small sip of his whiskey. A small, dry chuckle, a sound more like a quiet cough, escaped him. And that's how I knew it was real. I just stared at him. He knew. He hadn't just seen the tattoo, he had understood it. He had used the exact same logic I would have used. In our world, the only things that are real are the things you can't find. "Robert's my oldest friend," he said, swirling the ice in his other glass. "He's a good man. But he's loud." He looked out at the crowd, as if searching for the right word. "He's always been loud. He doesn't understand the strength of silence. He thinks the man who shouts the loudest is the one in command." He turned his gaze back to me. It was intense. "He doesn't get it. The truly dangerous ones, the truly powerful ones, are the silent ones." He held out the second glass of whiskey to me. "I believe this is yours." I hadn't told him what I drank. I just took it. He raised his own glass, not in a toast to the room, but in a toast to me. "It is a genuine honor," he said, his voice dropping even lower, "to be on the same side of the line as you, ma'am." "Ma'am." The word hit me with the force of a physical blow. My father, a captain, called me a secretary. This man, a decorated SEAL, called me ma'am. I didn't know what to do. My eyes burned. I looked down at the glass in my hand, trying to get myself under control. He wasn't finished. "And for the record, Colonel," he said, his voice now cold, "what happened in that backyard, it wasn't right." That was it. That was the validation. It wasn't an apology. He wasn't apologizing for his friend. He was a soldier, stating a fact. A fact I had been waiting my entire life to hear someone, anyone, from my father's world say out loud. It wasn't right. He saw me. He didn't see Robert's daughter. He didn't see Alexia the staffer. He saw a fellow officer, a commander. He saw me. And in that moment, in that loud, glittering ballroom, I felt something in my chest that had been frozen for decades. Crack! I finally looked up from my glass and met his eyes. "Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel," I said. My voice was rough. A small nod of understanding passed between us. The transaction was complete. We stood there for another 10 minutes. We didn't talk about my family. We didn't talk about the barbecue. We talked about work. We talked about strategy, about the changing political tides, about the challenges of leadership, all in the theoretical, unclassified way you do at these events. But it wasn't small talk. It was a conversation, a real, grounded conversation between two professionals, two equals. It was, perhaps, the first real conversation I'd had all year. Finally, he glanced at his watch. Well, Colonel, I've taken up enough of your time. I have to go make nice with the brass. He finished his glass. It was good to see you, Briggs, I said, and I meant it. And you, ma'am? He gave me a sharp, respectful nod. If you ever need anything from our loud world, you call me. And just like that, he was gone. He melted back into the crowd of uniforms. I stood there, alone again. But it was a different kind of alone. The club soda I'd been holding was gone, replaced by a glass of fine single malt. The hollow, lonely feeling in my chest was gone, replaced by a small, warm coal of something. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't triumph. It was hope. That one quiet nod, that single, respectful ma'am from a man my father idolized. It was worth more than 1,000 "I'm proud of yous" that my father would never say. I finished my drink. I didn't feel like a ghost anymore. I felt like a soldier. I felt strong. That tiny warm seed of hope was all I needed. That meeting with Lieutenant Colonel Briggs, it had changed something. That small warm coal of hope he'd given me at the gala stayed with me. For the first time, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt seen. I held my head higher at the Pentagon. I found myself walking with a new, quiet confidence. The Alexia shell felt a little less like a prison. I had just returned from a classified 3-day trip to Germany. It was the kind of high-stakes, high-stress work that left me physically drained but mentally sharp. It was 9 p.m. I had just walked into my apartment, and I was actually looking forward to a quiet night in. No Stouffer's lasagna this time. I was going to order some real food, maybe some Thai. I felt good. I felt strong. Then, the phone rang. It wasn't my cell. It was the actual landline, the one I keep for emergencies and for my parents. The sound was shrill, an interruption of the peace I'd been building. I picked it up. Hello? Alexia. Oh, thank God, Alexia, you have to help. It was my mother, Elaine. But this wasn't her usual passive-aggressive monotone. This was full-blown, 5-alarm panic. Her voice was high, breathy, and theatrical. My body tensed. The colonel in me took over. Mom, calm down. What's wrong? Is it Dad? Is everyone okay? It's Kevin. It's your brother, she wailed, and I heard a sob crackle over the line. He's in trouble, Alexia. Real trouble. I closed my eyes, my exhaustion returning like a lead blanket. Kevin. Of course it was Kevin, the golden child, the Ford F-150. What did he do this time? I said, my voice already losing its warmth. Oh, it's so terrible. He went to Atlantic City. He owes people money, Alexia. A lot of money. They said they're going to break his legs. I rubbed the bridge of my nose. Atlantic City. Gambling. Of course. How much, Mom? $30,000, she choked out, as if the number itself was a physical blow. I was silent. $30,000. Just gone. Pissed away on a blackjack table by a 46-year-old man who was still finding himself. Alexia, please, she begged. You're his sister. You have to help him. You're the only one who can. You have that good, stable job in D.C. You have the money. We don't. Your father's on his Navy pension. We can't. You have to pay it, Alexia. You have to save your brother. There it was. The ask. The assumption. The expectation. The responsible paper-pushing daughter will clean up the mess. The old Alexia would have sighed, opened her checkbook, and felt sick about it. But the woman standing in this apartment had been validated by a seal. The woman standing in this apartment commanded Unit 79. No, I said. The line went silent. The fake sobbing stopped instantly. What? What did you say? My mother's voice was suddenly cold. The panic was gone, replaced by a sharp, venomous chill. I said no, Mom, I repeated, my own voice calm, professional, and tired. I'm not paying it. Kevin is a grown man. He made this choice. He needs to take responsibility for it. Responsibility? She hissed. The word was an insult. What do you know about responsibility, Alexia? Other than your little spreadsheets? Your father is so disappointed in you. We're talking about your brother's life. I'm not arguing about this, Mom. My answer is no. How can you be so selfish? She spat. How can you be so cold? With all that money you make, you're just going to hoard it and be this bitter, lonely woman. Is that it? Fine. But I want you to think about this. Do you want your brother to get hurt? Do you want his blood on your hands? The guilt trip. The final, desperate, nuclear option. I was about to hang up. I was about to say something I'd regret when I heard a muffled sound on the other end. Just give me the damn phone, Elaine. I heard the clatter of the receiver being snatched, and then my father's voice, not booming, but hissing into the phone, thick with rage and whiskey. Listen here, girl, he spat. Girl! Not Alexia. Not Colonel. Girl! I don't know what high and mighty act you think you're pulling, he continued, his voice rising. And I don't give a damn about your paper-pushing job down in D.C. You are a daughter of this family. You hear me? I sacrificed. I paid for that fancy West Point education. I put you on this path. You owe us. You owe your brother. I was silent. I was just frozen. The sheer naked toxicity of it and the unfairness. It was suffocating. I am not, he roared, going to let my son be crippled because my daughter is a selfish bitch. You will help your brother. You will wire that money. That is not a request. He paused, taking a ragged breath. And then he delivered the final, fatal blow. The one word he knew, in his military mind, was the ultimate, non-negotiable end of all discussion. That's an order! The word, order, just hung in the air. My entire world stopped. It didn't just slow down. It ceased to exist. All I could hear was that one single word echoing. Order. A retired Navy captain, a man who maxed out at 03, was giving an order to an active duty Army colonel, to an 06, to his daughter. The arrogance, the breathtaking, stunning, catastrophic arrogance, the lifetime of disrespect, the casual humiliations, the little secretary jokes, the Christmas gift certificates, the unread emails. It all coalesced into this one, single, horrific word. He didn't see me. He never had. He wasn't talking to Colonel Walls. He was yelling at girl. All that hope from Briggs? All that strength I thought I'd built. It all vanished, replaced by a white-hot, silent rage that was so pure it felt like ice. My mother's panicked voice came back on the line. Alexia? Alexia, are you there? Did you hear your father? He's just upset. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. My voice, when it finally came out, was a voice I'd never used with them before. It was the voice I used in the SIF. It was the voice I used to save 48 lives. It was cold. It was dead. It was absolute. You do not, I said, my words perfectly spaced, have that authority. What? My mother whispered. You will not ever call me about this again. And I hung up. I pressed the end button on the receiver. I stood there in the dark apartment. The silence. It wasn't the peaceful, earned silence of the SIF. It wasn't the lonely, empty silence of the microwave. It was a new kind of silence. It was the silence of a bomb that had just been armed. It was the silence of a retaining wall right before the floodwaters break it apart. It was full, and it was brimming with a cold, righteous fury. After I hung up on my mother, the silence in my apartment was different. That cold, righteous fury I felt. It didn't fade. It didn't explode. It settled. It settled deep into my bones like a block of ice. For the next 2 weeks, I lived with that block of ice inside me. I went to the SCIF. I commanded my unit. I saved lives. I came home. And I listened to the silence. My parents, of course, were furious. My mother left a series of hysterical, weeping voicemails that turned into angry, accusatory voicemails. How dare you hang up on me? Your father is… I've never seen him so. You've broken his heart, Alexia. Kevin is… It's all your fault if something happens. Your fault. I just deleted them, one by one. The ice block inside me just got a little colder. Then, the inevitable command performance. My parents' 45th wedding anniversary. It was being held at the Annapolis Country Club. A big, formal dinner. The pinnacle of their social climbing, keeping up appearances world. I couldn't not go. Not going would be a public declaration of war, and I wasn't ready for that. My anger was cold, but it didn't have a strategy yet. So, I put on the Alexia costume again. The same invisible black dress from the gala. I drove to Annapolis. I walked into the ballroom, which was dripping with crystal and smelling of expensive perfume and old money. My father, Robert Walls, was in his element. He was at the center of the room, in his best suit, a glass of bourbon in his hand, his voice booming, retelling old Navy stories to a captive audience. My mother, Elaine, was floating around him, her face tight with a practiced socialite smile. And then I saw him, sitting at the head table next to my father. Lieutenant Colonel Briggs. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. He gave me a slow, respectful nod. I nodded back. My father, busy telling a story, saw none of it. I just wanted this night to be over. I found my seat, ate my dry chicken, and mentally prepared my escape route. Then, I heard the tink, tink, tink of a spoon against a crystal glass. Oh, God! The toasts. My father, his face flushed with alcohol and self-importance, stood up. He held his glass high. Elaine, he boomed, my beautiful wife, 45 years of putting up with me. You deserve a medal. He laughed. The room laughed. He then raised his glass a little higher. And I want to make a special toast to my son. To Kevin. I felt the ice inside me crackle. He's had a tough road, my father said, his voice thick with false emotion. But he's a fighter. He's got guts. And I am so damn proud to announce he's starting his own brave new business venture. To Kevin. To Kevin, the room echoed. Brave new business venture. The $30,000 gambling debt. The order he'd given me over the phone. I just stared at my plate. I could feel Briggs's eyes on the side of my face, but I didn't look. And then, my father turned, his smile slick, and he pointed his glass at me. And finally, he slurred, just slightly, a toast. To my little girl. My daughter, Alexia. The entire room turned to look at me. I was trapped in the spotlight. Well, he chuckled, as if sharing a private joke. She's still doing a great job. Stapling papers down in D.C. Keeping that coffee hot for the big bosses. He roared with laughter. A few people at his table, his old Navy buddies, joined in. The rest of the room just smiled politely, that tight, uncomfortable smile people get when they know a line has been crossed. My father, he thought it was his greatest hit. He was still laughing. My face was a perfect, blank mask. I didn't look at my father. I didn't look at my mother, who was smiling her brittle, isn't he a character smile. I did the only thing that mattered. Slowly, I lifted my head, and I looked directly across the room at Lieutenant Colonel Briggs. Our eyes locked, and the ice inside me. It didn't just crack. It shattered. Briggs was not laughing. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't even looking at me. He was looking at my father. And his face, it held no anger, no humor. It was just a mask of clear, profound, and utter disappointment. My father, in his drunken, arrogant glory, was so busy trying to get a laugh at my expense that he had no idea. He had no idea that the one man in that room he truly respected, the legendary SEAL, his old friend, was looking at him like he was a pathetic, ignorant fool. He had no idea that Briggs knew. And in that instant, everything changed. The pain I'd felt at the barbecue, gone. The rage I'd felt on the phone, evaporated. All that was left was a terrible, cold, and perfect clarity. It was the last straw. But it wasn't the straw that broke my back. It was the straw that finally broke the spell. I didn't need his respect. I didn't need his validation. I didn't need anything from him. He was just a loud, sad old man, embarrassing himself in front of his friends. Slowly, deliberately, I picked up my cloth napkin from my lap. I folded it. I placed it gently on the table next to my uneaten food. I stood up. The room was still quiet, the echo of my father's laugh fading. Every eye was on me. My father, his smile frozen, stared at me. "Alexia, what are you doing?" I didn't answer him. I didn't look at him. I looked at Briggs. I gave him the same respectful nod he had given me. And then I turned and I walked out of the ballroom. I didn't run. I walked. I heard my mother whisper, "Robert, Robert, do something." I walked through the lobby. I pushed open the glass doors. The cool, clean night air hit my face. I got into my car and just sat. I sat in the silent, dark parking lot. And I did not cry. I just looked at my hands on the steering wheel. The light from a lamppost caught the gold on my right hand. My West Point ring. I touched the raised crest. I thought of the oath I had sworn. Honor, duty, country. Those were the words that defined me. Not girl, not secretary, not daughter. Honor, duty, country. I closed my eyes, and a single sentence, a line I had read 100 times in the old cadet chapel at West Point, a line from the Bible, flashed into my mind. John 8:32, "And you will know the truth." That quote? It's amazing how one sentence can change everything. It's the moment you stop hoping they'll change and you realize you have the power. It's the moment the truth becomes your weapon. If you have ever had that one final moment of clarity, that last straw that finally set you free, hit that like button. And I want you to comment just one word for me, a word I was feeling right then. Truth. I sat up straighter in the car. And the truth will set you free. My father had built his entire world on his loud, fake stories. He had used them to make himself big and me small. But my world, my real world, was built on secrets. It was built on silence. And it was built on a truth he couldn't even comprehend. I realized I didn't have to yell. I didn't have to fight. I didn't have to use an order he didn't respect. All I had to do was let the truth speak for itself. I started the car. The cold block of ice inside me was gone. In its place was a plan. That night, I didn't drive home to D.C. The plan that had formed in my head in that dark country club parking lot was too clear, too sharp. I couldn't wait. I drove straight to Fort Meade. I spent the rest of the night in my small, windowless cot room, just off the SIF. I didn't sleep. I just planned. I ran through every scenario, every move and counter-move. This wasn't an act of revenge. Revenge is hot. This was a tactical operation, and it was ice cold. At 0700, showered and in my full Class A uniform, I was standing in front of General Hale's desk. He was sipping his morning coffee, looking over the daily intelligence brief. He glanced up. "Colonel Walls, you're in early. Or late, I suppose." "General," I said, my voice perfectly level. I stood at parade rest. He put his mug down, his eyes narrowing slightly. He was a 4-star. He knew me. He knew I was not here for small talk. "What's on your mind, Alexia?" I didn't flinch. "Sir, I have a formal request regarding the upcoming Command Achievement Ceremony." He raised an eyebrow. "Go on." I laid out the plan. I did not include a single word of personal history. I did not kvetch. I did not complain about my family. I presented it as a strategic, high-value morale operation. "General, I am requesting a partial declassification of the Operation Black Fog file," I began. "Specifically, the unclassified citation summary and the after-action report on the 48 lives saved." I believe it would be a significant morale boost for the signals intelligence community to see their work publicly, if partially, acknowledged. He steepled his fingers, listening. That's a heavy lift, Colonel. The declassification process. I've already highlighted the specific, non-critical sections, sir. No methods, no sources. Just the problem, my decision, and the result. He nodded slowly. And he knew there was more. And, I continued, I would like to extend a formal invitation to a small group of honored veterans to attend the ceremony. They are of the old guard, the boots on the ground generation. I believe it would be a valuable cross-generational opportunity to show them how modern warfare and intelligence saves the boots on the ground they care so much about. General Hale leaned back in his chair. He could read me like a briefing book. He was looking for the why. He was looking for vendetta, for emotion. I showed him nothing but pure, cold resolve. And who, he finally asked, did you have in mind for this cross-generational opportunity? My father's old unit, sir, I said without blinking. Captain Robert Walls, retired Navy, and his surviving command team, including Lieutenant Colonel Briggs. The general held my gaze for a solid 10 seconds. I saw a flicker of understanding, maybe even a tiny, almost imperceptible smile. He knew the stories about paper pusher walls. Everyone did. You are sure about this, Colonel? He asked, his voice low. I am sure, General, I replied. The truth needs to be known. I had used the magic words, truth, honor, duty. He was a man of the old school, just like my father. But unlike my father, he was smart. He nodded once. Very well, Colonel. The truth it is. Put the request on my desk. I'll sign off on it. He picked up his coffee mug. Just try not to burn the whole place down. Sir, I said. I saluted, spun on my heel, and walked out. I didn't go back to my cot. I went back to my kingdom. I walked through the 5 layers of security, the hiss of the vault doors sealing behind me, and sat down at my terminal in the cool blue light of the skiff. This wasn't a grieving daughter. This wasn't a victim. This was a commander. And this was a battlefield she understood. My fingers flew across the keyboard. This wasn't a request. It was an operation. First, the declassification request. I routed it through the proper channels, attaching the general's pre-approved authorization code. It was flagged, processed, and approved in under an hour. The file for Operation Black Fog was now cleared for a public citation reading. Check. Next, the guest list. I opened the event protocol. I began typing. I created a new entry. Honored Veterans Delegation, U.S. Navy, RET. I typed the names. Captain, RET, Robert Walls. Lieutenant Colonel, RET, Briggs, and 10 other names from my father's old command. I clicked the drop-down menu for seating assignments. I moved them from General Admission to VIP. I moved them again. Assigned seating, front row, center. I checked the box. Special acknowledgement, check. The invitations, sealed with the official Department of Defense crest, would be sent by formal mail. But I needed to make sure the bait was taken. I needed to control the narrative. I stepped out of the SCF and into a public area, and I made a phone call. She picked up on the first ring. What? Her voice was cold, still angry from 2 weeks ago. Mom, it's Alexia. I know who it is, she snapped. Your father is still... Mom, I interrupted, my voice perfectly neutral, almost pleasant. I have some good news. A cold, suspicious silence. What? I've been working on something at the office, I said, choosing my words carefully. And I was able to pull some strings. It seems there's going to be a recognition at an upcoming formal ceremony at Fort Meade. For your generation of veterans, for Dad and his friends. The silence stretched. I could hear her processing it. What? What kind of recognition? She asked. A very significant one, I said. They're being invited as the primary guests of honor. They're being seated in the front row. I heard a sharp intake of breath. The ice melted instantly, replaced by a gushing theatrical excitement. "Oh my God!" she shrieked. "Oh, Robert, Robert, get in here. Alexia got them too." "Oh, Alexia, that's wonderful. After all these years, after everything he's done, they're finally going to recognize your father's service." I just held the phone away from my ear, listening to her joy. "He's going to be so proud," she gushed. "I have to buy a new dress. Oh, this is the best news, Alexia. I knew you'd make it right." "The invitations are in the mail," I said, my voice flat. "It's a formal ceremony, Mom." Of course, of course. Oh, thank you, sweetie." "Yes, Mom," I said, looking out at the sterile hallway. "It's going to be a very memorable day. Goodbye." I hung up. Phase 2 was complete. Now, I just had to wait for the final confirmation. It came 3 days later. I was at my terminal, running a diagnostic, when a new email popped up in my personal inbox. My personal inbox had been silent for months. The sender, Robert Walls. The subject, your invite. My hand hovered over the mouse. I clicked it. The email was short. It was arrogant. It was perfect. "Received the invitation. Good. About time that paper-pushing job of yours did something useful. Me and the boys will be there. We're looking forward to it. P.S. Make sure you wear something presentable. It's a formal event." I read it once, then I read it again. Presentable. Paper-pushing job. The old Alexia would have felt the sting. The old Alexia would have been hurt. The new Alexia just felt a cold, sharp sense of victory. I didn't get angry. I didn't reply. I just saved it. I flagged it. I moved the email into a new, secure folder on my personal drive. A folder I'd just created. A folder I'd titled Evidence. I closed the email. I looked at the blue glow of my screens, the map of the world, the silent flow of data. Bait taken, I thought. The operation is a go. The day of the command achievement ceremony was bright, cold, and clear. I didn't see my family when they arrived. I was already in position, standing in the shadows of the wings, stage left, in my full army dress uniform, the blues. My ribbons were perfectly aligned. My boots were shined to a mirror finish. I was calm. I was a commander, and this was just another operation. From my vantage point, I could see the entire auditorium at Fort Meade. It was packed. The Army band was playing a low, formal march. The stage was flanked by the American flag and the Army flag, and in the center, hanging from the rafters, was a massive new banner. It just said, Unit 79. My eyes scanned the front row, and there they were, the honored veterans delegation. My mother, Elaine, was in her element. She was in a new, bright blue dress, exactly what she'd wear to a country club. She was practically vibrating with excitement, her phone already out, busily taking pictures of the stage, the crowd, and, of course, her hero husband. And next to her, my father. Captain, Ret, Robert Walls. He was in his old, tight-fitting navy dress uniform, his chest puffed out so far I was surprised the buttons weren't popping. He was the picture of arrogance. He looked at the Unit 79 banner above his head with a look of complete, dismissive confusion. He leaned over to the man sitting next to him, Lieutenant Colonel Briggs. Briggs was not in uniform. He was in a simple, dark suit. He wasn't looking at the stage. He wasn't looking at my father. His eyes, they were scanning the corners of the room, the exits, the shadows. He was a professional in a room of amateurs. I watched my father lean in, his voice a loud whisper I could practically read from across the room. He gestured at the banner. Unit 79, my father scoffed. Must be some kind of new computer support unit. IT guys. Briggs just sat there. His face was granite. He didn't nod. He didn't reply. He just stared straight ahead, his eyes fixed on the shadows in the corner, my corner. The music swelled, then stopped. A voice came over the loudspeaker. All rise. We stood. The national anthem played. Then, please be seated. General Hale, my 4-star commander, walked to the podium. He was a tall, imposing man, and his voice filled the room without effort. Thank you all for being here, he began, his voice rumbling. We are here today to recognize the kind of work that is, by its very nature, never recognized. We honor the visible, the boots on the ground. But today, we honor the silent, the unseen, the strategists, the protectors. My father in the front row nodded along, his face a mask of smug agreement. Yes, yes, get on with it, honor me. General Hale continued. We are here to present the Joint Meritorious Unit Award. But before we do, I want to present a special individual commendation. This is for a commander who, in a moment of absolute crisis, saved 48 American lives during Operation Black Fog. I saw my father's back straighten even more. He nodded again. 48 lives. Yes, this is it. He was preening, ready to stand. This, General Hale's voice cut through the silence, was a commander who saw a fatal flaw in the enemy's defense. A commander who, when the mission went sideways and our men were trapped, ignored protocol and wrote a new playbook, all in under 5 minutes. A commander who made the decision that no one else dared to make. My father was practically vibrating, a huge proud smile on his face. He was ready. General Hale paused. He looked up, his eyes scanning the crowd, and he smiled. Please join me in honoring the commanding officer of Unit 79. My father's hand started to rise. He was literally about to push himself up out of his seat. Colonel Alexia Walls. It was in that 1 second that everything happened at once. It was a chain reaction. The first sound, a sharp clatter. My mother, Elaine, her face a mask of impossible, grotesque shock, had dropped her iPhone. It hit the polished floor. The first image, my father. He had frozen, mid-rise. His smile was still plastered on his face, but it was broken. It was a rictus of confusion. The first action. Before the name, Walls had even finished echoing. Before anyone, my father, my mother, the crowd. Before anyone could process the information. Lieutenant Colonel Briggs moved. It was not a choice. It was an instinct. He didn't just stand. He snapped to his feet. As if he were a spring that had been released, he was on his feet, his back rigid, his heels together. And in one clean, sharp motion, his right hand came up. And he saluted. He, a legendary SEAL, a man my father worshipped, turned away from my father, away from the stage. And he saluted the dark corner where I was standing. His salute was a command. It was the action that broke my father's paralysis. It was the action that finally broke my father. My name was called again. Colonel Alexia Walls, please come to the stage. I stepped out of the shadows. I was in my full army dress uniform. My chest was not empty. It was full of my life's work, the ribbons and medals I had earned in silence. I walked. I kept my eyes forward, but I could see him. I saw my father. His eyes met mine, and I watched his face crumble. It happened in 5 distinct phases. First, arrogance. That's my name. Wait, what? Second, confusion. What is she doing? Why is she in that uniform? Third, shock. Briggs. Why is Briggs saluting her? Fourth, dawning, horrific, sickening realization. Operation Black Fog. Unit 79. Colonel. It's her. And fifth, just pure, unadulterated, bottomless shame. I walked onto the stage. I faced General Hale. I saluted him. He saluted me back. He took my hand and shook it, a firm, iron grip. And then he leaned into the microphone, still holding my hand, and he looked out at the front row, at my father, at Briggs. The Army, General Hale said, his voice booming with pride, is proud. The Navy should be proud. And then he delivered the final, brilliant, beautiful twist. He, an Army 4-star general, looked at me, an Army colonel, and with a room full of Navy veterans, he used the only title that mattered in that moment. Thank you, he said loud and clear, Madam Admiral. The entire auditorium, taking their cue from Briggs, exploded. They were on their feet. The applause was not just polite, it was thunder. It was a roar. And in that roar, I watched it happen. Robert Walls, my father, a man defined by 40 years of military protocol, a man who had screamed order at me over the phone. He was compelled by a force stronger than his own ego. He was compelled by the lifetime of rules he had hammered into me. Respect the rank, honor the uniform. I watched him, trembling, slowly, agonizingly, push himself to his feet. I watched him, his face ashen, his body shaking with a shame so profound I could feel it. I watched him raise his hand, and he saluted his daughter. His hand was shaking. My hand was steady. The applause was a physical thing, a wave of sound that hit me, washed over me, and then slowly receded. The band began to play again. People were standing, blinking, turning to their neighbors. General Hale squeezed my hand, then let it go. I was still on stage. My father was still frozen in that terrible, shaking salute. An aide, sensing the moment was over, gently touched his arm. "Sir?" It was like a string had been cut. My father's hand dropped. He collapsed back into his chair, his face a ghastly pale gray. He looked broken. He looked like a man who had just seen his own ghost. The formal part of the ceremony was over. The crowd began to disperse, moving from the auditorium to the reception hall next door for cocktails and hors d'oeuvres. I walked off the stage. I didn't look at the front row again. The reception was a blur of blue and green, Army and Navy uniforms. The moment I entered the room, I was no longer Alexia. I was the woman of the hour. I was immediately surrounded. "Colonel Walls, congratulations. A hell of a citation." "Ma'am, an honor to meet you." "Superb work, Colonel. Just superb." I shook hands. I nodded. I smiled a small professional smile. I was passed from one general to another, from one fellow colonel to another. They were all men. And for the first time, it didn't matter. They weren't seeing a woman. They were seeing the rank. They were seeing the citation. I accepted a glass of water from a tray. Over the rim of the glass, I scanned the room. And I saw them. My parents. They were in the corner, near the service entrance. They were standing completely alone. No one was talking to them. No one was even looking at them. The circle of my father's old Navy buddies who had been hanging on his every word for decades. They were gone. They were, across the room, talking to other people, actively avoiding the black hole of shame that now surrounded my father. My father was just staring into a glass. My mother was standing next to him, her hands clasped in front of her, her face a mask of pale, furious shock. They were invisible. The crowd around me parted for a moment, and a new figure stepped in. Lieutenant Colonel Briggs. He walked right past my father, right past my mother, as if they didn't exist. He stopped directly in front of me. He was in his dark suit, but he stood like he was in full uniform. He looked me in the eye. His own eyes, the eyes of a seal, were sharp, clear, and respectful. "Colonel Walls," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Colonel Briggs," I nodded back. He didn't smile. He just held my gaze. "I've been in this business for 40 years, ma'am. I've heard a lot of citations. I've heard a lot of stories." He paused, and I saw him glance, just for a second, over my shoulder to where my father was standing in his corner. He looked back at me. "That," he said, "was one of the most impressive and honest citations I have ever heard in my entire life." My throat tightened. "Robert, he's a good friend," Briggs said, his voice dropping even lower. "But he's loud. He always was. He talks about the glory of the fight." He shook his head slightly. "Men like him, they forget what the real fight is. It's not about the noise. It's about the silence. It's about the decisions you make in that silence." He raised his glass of water, an echo of his gesture at the gala. "We are lucky," he said, "that you are on our side. It was an honor to be in this room today, ma'am." He drank. I drank. That was it. That was the validation. Not the applause. Not the salute from my father. The respect from a peer. The acknowledgement from a man who knew what was real. "Thank you, Colonel Briggs," I said. "Ma'am." He nodded. He turned and walked away. The crowd began to close in again, but I needed air. I murmured, "Excuse me," and made my way to the bar to put down my glass. And a hand grabbed my arm. A hand with perfectly manicured blood-red nails. My mother. Her face was a nightmare. It was contorted. Her eyes were red, yes, but not from crying. They were red with a white-hot, venomous rage. She had dragged me into a small alcove, away from the crowd. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice shaking. I just looked at her. I felt nothing. No pain, no anger, just a vast, cold emptiness. "How dare you do this?" she whisper-screamed, her fingers digging into my arm. You humiliated him. You humiliated your father, in front of everyone, in front of Briggs." She was acting as if I had written the citation, as if I had been the one telling lies all these years. He's ruined," she sputtered, and this is when the tears finally came. Not tears of pride, not tears of shame, but tears of pure, selfish fury. "You did this, you planned this, you bitch." She spat the word, and I just looked at her. Really looked at her. At this 65-year-old woman, my mother, who was more concerned with the appearance of honor than the reality of it, who was, right now, defending the man who had belittled me my entire life and attacking the daughter who had just been vindicated. The pain I had been waiting for, it just didn't come. I felt pity. "Mother," I said, and my voice was calm. It was the calmest thing in the room. "I didn't do anything." "You did," she shrieked. "No," I said, pulling my arm free from her grasp. "I just existed. I just told the truth. The truth did that. The truth he couldn't handle." "You..." "Excuse me, Mother. I have to get back to my guests." I turned. I left her in the alcove, her mouth open, her face crumbling. I walked back into the crowd. I shook more hands. I stayed for exactly 20 more minutes, and then, as I was leaving, I saw them. They were leaving too. Not through the grand entrance. They were slipping out a side door. The service exit near the kitchens. My father was walking in front. He didn't have his chest puffed out anymore. His shoulders were slumped. His head was down. He looked small. He looked 20 years older. My mother was scurrying behind him, not even touching him. They didn't see me. They slipped out the door, without a word, without a look back. No goodbyes. I just watched them go. And I didn't view it follow. For the first time in my life, I felt the urge to run after him, to fix it, to make it. And I just didn't. I let them go. I took a deep breath. The air in the reception hall suddenly felt lighter. I realized I didn't need his approval anymore. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need his permission to be successful. I had spent my entire life starving for a single crumb of validation from him. And now I was full. I have the respect, I thought to myself, of the men he always wanted to be. And that was enough. The days that followed were quiet. Too quiet. The storm had broken. This was the eerie calm. 3 days later, my phone, which had been blissfully silent, buzzed. It was my mother. I looked at the call. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text message popped up. From her. "Your father wants to talk to you." I stared at the text. "Your father wants to talk to you." The old phrasing, the old dynamic, as if he was the king, summoning the courtier. The old Alexia would have called back immediately, heart pounding, desperate. I just looked at it. I thought about what he really wanted. He didn't want to talk. He wanted to rage. He wanted to blame. He wanted to make this my fault. He wanted to talk to Alexia, his little girl. I typed a reply. My fingers were steady. I wrote one sentence. "When he is ready to speak with Colonel Walls, he knows where to find me." I hit send. And then, I did something I had never done before in my entire life. I went into my mother's contact. I blocked her number. I blocked my father's number. I turned off the notifications. I sat back, my phone dark on the table. The silence in my apartment was no longer the heavy, suffocating silence of rage. It was clean. It was open. It was the sound of freedom. It's been a year of quiet, a year of healing, a year of rebuilding, not on my family's broken foundation, but on my own. I'm still at Fort Meade, but I'm no longer in the bunker. My title changed. I'm the Director of Strategic Operations now. And my office? My office has a window. It's a small detail, a simple 4-foot by 4-foot square of glass. But it's everything. It overlooks a small green courtyard. I can feel the sun on my face. I can see the seasons change. After 20 years in the blue, artificial glow of a SIF, the sunlight is a revolution. The silence in this office is different, too. The silence in the SIF was about secrets. The silence here is about peace. I was sitting at my desk, the late afternoon sun warming my hands, finishing a report. There was a soft knock on my open door. A young woman was standing there. A brand new Army lieutenant, her uniform impossibly crisp, her face a mix of terror and determination. "Colonel Walls?" "Ma'am," she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Lieutenant," I smiled, gesturing to the chair in front of my desk. "Come in, close the door." She did, sitting on the edge of the seat as if it were spring-loaded. "Ma'am, I don't know if I should be here. I'm struggling." "With what?" I asked, leaning forward, my voice soft. "With all of it," she said, frustration and exhaustion in her voice. "My command. They're fine. But the other officers in my unit, they don't listen. They talk over me in briefings. They treat me like I'm the coffee girl. I'm trying to balance being respectful with being heard. And it's not working. I don't know what to do." I just looked at her, and I saw myself, 25 years ago, desperate for a mentor, desperate for someone to just see me. I took a breath, and I gave her the advice I never got. "Lieutenant," I said, "stop trying to balance." She looked confused. "Ma'am, stop trying to be nice. Stop trying to be liked. Stop trying to manage their egos. That's not your job. Your job is to be excellent." I leaned in. "They talk over you in a briefing. You let them. You stay quiet. And when they're done, you stand up, you walk to that whiteboard, and you deliver the 3 facts, the 3 data points they missed. That solve the problem. You don't do it with anger. You don't do it with emotion. You do it with cold, hard competence." I smiled a little. "There is nothing in this world," I said, my voice just above a whisper, "that terrifies an insecure man more than a competent woman. Don't ever," I said, "let anyone else define your value. Don't tell them you're good. Show them. Let your work be the only voice in the room. Let your work speak for itself." The lieutenant looked at me, her eyes wide. The terror was gone. It was replaced with clarity. "Let the work speak," she repeated, nodding. "Let the work speak," I confirmed. She stood up, her back straighter. "Thank you, ma'am. Thank you." "You're welcome, Lieutenant. Now get back to it." She smiled, a real, genuine smile, and she left. I watched her go, and I felt a warmth. I was passing it on. I was building my own legacy, a legacy of silence, yes, but also of capability. I turned back to my computer, ready to finish my report, and I saw an email. It was in my personal inbox, my inbox that I had kept clean. I hadn't heard from them in a year. The block was still in place, but this was from a new account. A generic, new Gmail account. The subject line was just 2 words. From Robert. My heart didn't pound. My hands didn't shake. I just looked at it. For a full minute. I wasn't afraid. I was curious. I clicked it. The email was clumsy, awkward. It was short. It read, Alexia, I saw the tape of the ceremony. They replayed it at the Vets Club last month. The part with your citation. Briggs was there. He told them it was the realest damn thing he'd ever seen. I'm proud of you, daughter. That was it. I sat there and I smiled. It wasn't a triumphant smile. It wasn't a smile of, ha, I won. It was a relieved smile, a soft, gentle, sad smile. I closed my eyes. The old Alexia. The Alexia from the barbecue. The Alexia from the SIF. She would have burst into tears. She would have grabbed the phone. She would have said, finally, you see me. She had lived, I had lived my entire 48-year-long life just to hear those 5 words. I'm proud of you, daughter. And I took a deep breath, and I let it out. And I opened my eyes. And I looked at the words on the screen. And I realized, with a profound and gentle and absolute certainty, I didn't need them anymore. The words, they were just words. They were a year too late. They had no weight. The hole inside me, the hole that had been carved out by his indifference, it was already filled. I had filled it myself. I had filled it with my work, with my honor, with the respect of men like Briggs, with the mentorship of women like that new lieutenant. The email was an echo from a ghost, a clumsy, late apology. And it was, okay. I didn't reply. I just moved my mouse. I right-clicked the email. I didn't delete it. I just saved it. I moved it to a folder I had created a year ago, a folder that I had simply named Past. I closed the folder. I shut down my computer. I stood up and I looked out my window. The sun was setting over the courtyard. It was beautiful. My father, he believed legacy was measured in medals, in loud stories, in the applause at a VFW hall or a country club. He spent his whole life telling people he was a hero. I've learned that a true legacy is quiet. It's defined by the people who salute you, not because they have to, but because they choose to. My silence, it was never weakness. It was discipline. It was strength. And in the end, after all of it, that silence was the order that rewrote my entire life. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't an easy one to tell, but I told it because I know I'm not the only one who has ever felt invisible. My journey was about finding my own definition of legacy. If this story resonated with you, please support our channel by liking and subscribing. And in the comments, I want to know, what's one piece of your own legacy you are proud of building? Your stories inspire me, and you remind all of us that we are not alone. Thank you for being here.